How often do you play video games? Once a week? 3 days a week? Daily? Video games are becoming very common among teens and adolescents and are a popular after school activity. The animations in the games are beginning to look as if they are real and you are actually in the game. Call of Duty, Mortal Kombat, and Gears of War are a few examples of violent video games that are riding to the top of the charts. Now, while playing these games, one would assume that it cannot be beneficial to your health if you are always shooting people in the games. However, contrary to popular belief, research shows that violent video games may cause initial increase in aggression because of the pressure that the game puts on you, but may not have a long-term detrimental effect. Throughout this podcast, we will examine the different research that took place that helps us prove this statement. Call of Duty is one of the most well-known and top-selling video game in the US. Many people have either played it or at least know what it is. Personally, I have known what Call of Duty was since I was 12. My older cousins have played it for many years before I started to also. For research purposes, I played a few rounds of Call of Duty to test whether or not I became more aggressive after playing the game. Before and after playing the game, I measured my heart rate in order to see if it increased at the end. Throughout the game, I was given different tasks to complete in order to finish the overall mission. During peak times, there would be a lot of people shooting at me, so I would become a little more frustrated than usual. If I kept dying, you would hear me say, "Not again," or "Why do you keep killing me?" These phrases are common while playing these games because, as I have noticed my cousins, brother, and friends, everyone tends to get louder and question the game when it gets more intense. During the second round, I was playing against my brother, and that was very frustrating to me. He is a better player than me, so he would kill me very easily in the game. I started to get more tensed, and my only goal was to kill him at least once in the game. Also, while playing, I noticed that the animations seemed very realistic, and I felt like I was in the game. After this round, I measured my heart rate again with the Fitbit, and it only increased my heart rate by a few BPM. With this information, we can predict that the game did not necessarily increase my aggression very much since my heart rate didn't necessarily change. Next time one of you play video games, maybe try measuring your heart rates to see if you personally become more tensed or not. Additionally, several research experiments tend to contradict each other because one study shows that there is no direct correlation on behavior, while another study argues that the video games make you desensitized to violence. In the Hitman study, Violent Video Game Exposure Effects on Aggressive Behavior, Hostile Feelings, and Depression, the researchers take individuals and splits them up into different groups with each of them being in different levels of video game violence, violent, non-violent, or no game. The individuals then proceed to play the games they were assigned, and then their trait aggression and aggressive behavior was measured. All three groups showed similar data, so this experiment shows that there may not be a correlation between video games and aggression. One fascinating point to note is that most violent video games and the least violent video game showed similar results in the end. This experiment reflects my experience while playing Call of Duty because I also did not portray a significant increase in heart rate or aggressive traits after I finished playing. I initially showed agitation during intense parts of the games, but then remained fairly calm. On the other hand, in a erratum to the effects of violent video game on physiological desensitization to real-life violence, the experiment led to the conclusion that violent video games may cause desensitization to violence in the real world. Participants were either shown or not shown a series of slasher clips and then were asked to watch films of real-world violence. The group that were shown the violent clips beforehand had lower heart rates than the group that was not shown any clips. This data suggests that if one is exposed to a lot of violence early on, they may be less sensitive towards the actual violence that happens. This experiment contradicts my experience as I was playing Call of Duty because I personally was not desensitized to violence. Have you ever wondered what the most common video games were in the US? I know I have. According to Wichita State University, 8 out of the 10 top-selling games in 2011 were violent shooting games. This portrays that many children and teens are exposed to violence at a young age because violent video games are becoming the most popular. However, this data does not show an increase in aggression in the teens because the number of homicides actually went down in 2011. Thus, since the homicide rates went down and the number of violent video game players went up, there may not be a direct correlation between the two. So, violent video games may not impact one's behavior enough to be detrimental to people or the society in real life. Oh, YouTube, one of the most influential websites that exists nowadays. Let's hear what some of the YouTubers like PewDiePie, Typical Gamer, and Ali A have to say about their experiences while playing violent video games like Call of Duty.
Target neutralized. Oh no! Holy shit, people are getting blown apart! Guys, come on. Here we go, headshot. Oh my god, watch out for that grenade.
As you've heard in the previous clips, one of the most common signs of aggression is the language and the tone in which it is said. The YouTubers begin to get louder as the game becomes more frustrating and seem to engage in more violent acts. Also, some of the YouTubers have a softer tone even when they are shooting people and are in a tense state. So the contradiction between the louder voices and softer tones portray that the aggression may depend on the person instead of the violent video games as a whole.
Oh, he's right there. Jump through, go through, go through, go through.
In the clip we just heard, Dennis is playing a non-violent shooter game called Hello Neighbor. Dennis still uses loud language and becomes frustrated and aggressive even though this is not a violent video game. This data with various YouTubers shows that whether or not the game is violent, people may become more aggressive and tense based on the situation they are in. Similar characteristics, including a loud voice and bad language in all the YouTubers that we heard, regardless of the amount of violence in the game. Some people may become more tense than others, but none of them are showing physical aggressiveness where they throw their controllers or hurt people near them in real life. Additionally, similar to how I observed myself play Call of Duty, I watched my brother and his friends play Call of Duty. My brother and his friends were on one team and they were playing against bots. They were pretty calm in the beginning, but they started to get louder as the other team started shooting at them. I heard phrases like, "Get out of the way," "Kill the guy on your left," and "Stop dying," which could all indicate tension or agitation within the game. However, 10 minutes after the game ended, all of them went back to their normal states. This observation shows that they may have had initial increase in agitation, but since they did not portray any physical aggression or show signs of the aggression after, there is no direct causation that video games lead to aggression in the long term. Some people may be affected by a small stimulus of violence than others because of their age. In Effects of Violent Video Games on Adolescents, the Overlooked Influence of Development, the author states that people at different ages react to the same stimulus in different ways. This means that violent video games may induce aggression in one person more than the other. At developmental ages from around 11 to 14, children are more sensitive to negativity and violence. These games may affect them more than when adults play the same game. For example, my brother may have acted more aggressively partly because he is 14 years old and his hormones are changing, so his mood and aggression may be more fluctuating than mine. This data portrays that aggression could be triggered by merely age than the video game themselves. So overall, aggression can be triggered by several factors, including intense situations, personal background, or one's age. Violent video games may lead to an increased frustrated state, but that does not lead to a causation to aggression. With my personal video game experience and further research of others playing video games, it is seen that violent video games lead to aggression in the tense states of the game, but do not produce detrimental effects to society in the real world. Aggression is an important topic to discuss because many people have suffered losses due to homicides or shootings by teenagers or adolescents. If these video games induce aggressive behavior, then we must try to prevent these incidents in real life by monitoring the usage of video games. However, throughout this podcast, it is shown that violent video games may increase initial agitation, but does not lead to long-term physical aggression. The work cited is linked on a separate document for all sources used in this podcast.